Hello again, welcome back to the channel. The clocks changed just a few nights ago, so we thought we'd take the opportunity of getting away for a few days before the great blackness envelops us and winter comes again. So we've come to the northwest of Scotland, and we're kind of hoping for a few days exploring the Assent area, just north of Ullapool. And something kind of special about this area, I'm very, very fond of it. Somebody wrote many years ago, in the beginning, God made Assent. And I can almost sympathise with that thought, because there is something primeval about the area. Geologically, of course, it's very special. And we'll maybe talk a bit about that as we go on. But it is a wonderful part of Scotland. And we travelled north and we stayed last night in Ullapool. And we haven't really been in Ullapool for a long while. The last time we spent any time there, it kind of looked a bit tired. But, you know, something's been happening there and a lot of money's been spent, and the kind of shore area looking on the harbour has all been redeveloped and is very, very fancy. There's some new restaurants, new bars, a couple of new coffee shops. So yeah, it seems to be thriving, and that's wonderful news. And we stayed there last night, strangely enough, in the car park of the Lochbroom and Coigach Free Church of Scotland. And the church congregation has very kindly decided to allow motorhomers and campervans to use their car park for a donation. And I mean, it's only, you know, a few spaces, and it's at the front of the church next to the pavement, so it's not terribly private or anything, but it's absolutely fine if you want a night in the town when you go for a meal or go to the pub or whatever, or perhaps one of the events that are held in the town from time to time. So it was pretty good, and although there are no immediate facilities for campervans at the church, like toilets or anything like that, there are public toilets like 5 minutes walk away. Not only public toilets, but showers as well, just at the area where people congregate to get the ferry out to the Outer Hebrides. So, you know, that's all good, and that's you know, that's a great benefit for the number of campervans and motorhomes who now use Ullapool and now visit Ullapool, either on the NC 500 or just travelling to this wonderful part of Scotland. So we're there tonight. I think we're going to head for the Portnaveigh campsite near Achiltebui, and it's a campsite we've visited a couple of times, the one that we like, and then we'll head up into Assent tomorrow. So I hope you'll stick with us. I hope you'll join us for this little 3 or 4 day adventure in Assent. beginning, God made Assent. Now consider the enormity of that. Tongue-in-cheek it may well be, but there's more than a hint of truth in it, a suggestion of age and antiquity, a landscape relic of a time before man walked on the face of the earth. Assent is most certainly a place apart, torn and riven by Atlantic winds and frost, bare and pockmarked by scouring glaciers, as though the bare bones of the earth were peeking through a kind of thin and flimsy layer of wet soil. A place that lies near the most northwestern reach of Scotland, of mainland Scotland, poised on the very edge of Europe. Now, I always associate Assent with the Scots poet Norman MacCaig, and one of his best known poems is called A Man in Assynt, and it contains the much quoted lines, "Who possesses this landscape? The man who bought it, or I who am possessed by it?" Possessed by it, a tiny phrase that signifies so much. A relationship that goes beyond mere ownership, beyond legal agreements and beyond formal recognition. A relationship that, in this case, suggests a one-way affair. Now, MacCaig also wrote these lines in reference to Assent, and I quite like these lines. "I can't pretend it gets sick for me in my absence, though I get sick for it. Yet I love it with special gratitude, since it sends me no letters, is never jealous, and expecting nothing from me, and gets nothing but cigarette packets and footprints." No matter how much we love a place, however we rhapsodise about it, however long we spend there or long for it from a distance, our relationship is limited. Our love is not reciprocated. Perhaps, just perhaps, we might be better to regard that relationship as a form of kinship, that everything, the mountain, the loch, the woods, the seas, ourselves are all part of the natural world, all part of this complex web of creation. The mayfly on the river with only a few hours of life, and the mountain that lasts an eternity, both belong to the same web as we do. We are all related. Norman MacCaig believed it was Assent's geology that was the foundation of its beauty. A complexity of low hills laid on a bedrock of Louisian gneiss, an ancient make-up that would give some credence to the "in the beginning" remark. Norman MacCaig was very aware of the human history of Assent, and particularly the devastating effects of the Highland clearances, a cruel event that still affects people today. A number of years ago, I made a television programme for the BBC about the area, and I recall interviewing one of the directors of the Assent Crofters, one of the very first community groups to buy the land where they lived and worked. John Mackenzie was his name, and as he spoke passionately about his grandparents being cleared from good fertile ground to a strip of rocky land by the foreshore, he had to kind of stop several times to compose himself. The anger and the sadness of that memory still had a strong effect on him. And in that emotional moment, I became very, very aware of the passions that are still simmering in this part of Scotland, where crofters were treated little better than the animals in the fields. MacCaig again. Men trampled under the hoofs of sheep and driven by deer to the ends of the earth, to men whose loyalty was so great it accepted their own betrayal by their own chiefs, and whose descendants now are kept in their place by English businessmen and the indifference of a remote and ignorant government. Thanks to land reform, those who live and work in Assent can now, to a certain extent, control their own destiny. This form of community land ownership isn't generally considered as an end in itself, but as a means of obtaining wider economic and social development, particularly within the Highlands and the Islands area. Fundamentally, the buyouts have given local folk a say on the management of their own land. And the spirit of land reform could be described as as an act of liberation, giving the people an opportunity to take more command of their own lives and ultimately their own destiny. I rather think Norman MacCaig would have approved of that. These changes in land ownership have taken place since the poet's death in 1996, but what has remained unchanged is the unique landscape of the region. Gaze on it from the ruffled foreland of Achnaheird and see his frieze of mountains filed on the blue air: Stackpolly, Coigach, Coolmore, Suilven, Canisp, a frieze and a litany. Norman MacCaig was a regular visitor to Assent and stayed in rented accommodation, first in Achmelvich, then here in Inverpollaidh in the shadow of Suilven. And those who knew him believe he would have been happy to spend most of his time here. Now, his love poems to the area suggest a deep affinity with the rugged landscape, but crucially, an affinity that went beyond the natural world to those who lived and worked here. Folk who scraped a living from the inhospitable land or from the storm-lashed seas. Norman MacCaig didn't mention Kunyog as part of his montane frieze, that row of mountains from Achnaheird. But he does describe it in another one of his poems as that tall huddle of anvils. It's a great description. Though approaching Kunyog from the south, there's very little to suggest anything of the mountain's grandeur. But view it from the north, maybe near the Kyleskew Bridge, and the first glimpse of this mountain can be quite intimidating. And on dour days of scudding cloud, our great anvil-shaped buttresses look distinctly menacing. The main backbone of the mountain, shy and retiring, hidden away by the perspective of the land, behind steep bastions, very steep bastions of terraced rock. From the Lochinver Road in the west, that retiring ridge becomes the dominant feature of the mountain, a kind of 3-mile wall of Torridonian sandstone with a splintered quartzite crest. And in the fiery light of a winter sunset, you can look distinctly fierce and distinctly threatening. But given a long summer's day, this old girl of the far northwest shows her kindly side, and all her threats just kind of melt away. Beautiful mountain. Suilven is generally regarded as the uncontested showpiece of Assent. That's it, away over my shoulder there. The landscape of Assent has a chameleon-like character that has the ability to either lift your spirits to soaring heights or plunge them into despair. If you walk into Suilven on a dour grey day when the midges and the clegs feast from your bare flesh and the sodden ground wants to suck you under, you'll know what I mean by despair. And yet, there are other times when Assent wears her wilderness gown with poise and subtlety. I once camped below Suilven's great bastion walls and was thrilled as a riot of sunset colour lit up the landscape in a pageant that was gloriously brash and extravagant. It was wonderful. Suilven has its own chameleon tendencies. From here, from Elphin in the east, it can look almost like the Matterhorn rise from its bedrock plinth of Louisian gneiss to a kind of narrowing spire. But from the Lochainver coast, its western sentinel, Castolia, forms a huge rounded bastion of quartzite capped sandstone. From Stackpolly or Coolmore in the south, its shape changes yet again into a long drawn out sugar loaf with an obvious depression in the middle, the Bealach Moor, the only break in the fortress-like defences. You can climb Suilven by a number of different routes, from Inverpollaidh in the southwest, from Lochainver in the north, or from here in Elphin in the east. Take your choice. The ascent isn't a particularly difficult one unless you actually traverse the whole mountain from east to west. But bear in mind that any ascent of Suilven involves a long walk-in. However you climb it, prepare to be possessed by it. Who owns this landscape? The millionaire who bought it? Or the poacher staggering downhill in the early morning with a deer on his back? Who possesses this landscape? The man who bought it, or I who am possessed by it?